Sotades of Maronea was an Alexandrian poet who flourished around 280 BCE. He adopted the manner of the Kinaidoi, controversial male street performers who dressed as women and sang satirical songs. He was notorious in his own time, but Sotades remained famous and widely read at least through late antiquity. Martial attacked him as gimmicky, but Athenaeus and Hephaestion quoted him. In the 4th century, Ausonius bragged that his library included what he called Sotades' wanton verse. And then, in the Middle Ages, his works vanished. All of them. Not a single fragment from a single work of Sotades has been directly transmitted. Only 11 lines from 4 of his Carmen survived the Middle Ages, plus a few dubia, incerta, and spuria that Powell refers to collectively as Sotadia. All of these are quotes by other authors. Amazingly, though, several new authentic lines of Sotades' poetry or references to him have been identified in the last 4 decades. All of these texts were known for centuries, but their authors were too coy to name him. Why? Because of Sotades' fatal overstep. Ptolemy II, known as Philadelphus, was the 2nd king in his dynasty. He married his sister Arsinoe, thinking that incestuous marriage was a common pharaonic practice that would cement their ties to the people of Egypt. He was wrong about this, but court poets such as Theocritus delivered sycophantic encomia at the wedding banquet nonetheless. Sotades also delivered a poem about the marriage, apparently in person, but it ended with an infamous insult, one whose metaphor was perhaps less subtle than the poet had imagined. The final line was, "You are pushing your kentron into an ungodly hole." A kentron is a stick with a metal tip at the end, used to prod horses in the way a modern jockey might use a crop. But you probably didn't need to know that to understand why he was executed. Which brings us to the new discoveries. Italian Hellenist Roberto Predagastini established a scholarly consensus that one of the 19 fragments generally dismissed as dubious was in fact a 12th authentic line of the poet's work. Moreover, it was the opening line of that notorious poem that got Sotades executed. This tells us that Sotades started the poem by pretending to praise the incestuous union, comparing it to Zeus's marriage to his sister Hera, which added to the shock of the final punchline. An obscure line of Callimachus was now easily identified as a reference to Sotades' fatal poem, also without naming him. This fragment of the Aetia begins with the first part of Sotades' newly authenticated line before the narrator interrupts himself because the story is too dangerous to finish. These discoveries triggered others, none of which were based on newly found texts. Michael Fontaine, a Cornell classicist who specializes in Plautus, re-examined the play Miles Gloriosus, which has a character called the Barbarian Poet. Traditionally, this character was thought to be based on Naevius, a Roman friend of the playwright. Fontaine argues that the Barbarian Poet instead referred to Sotades. Jan Quapij, a Hellenist at the University of Warsaw, returned to an ancient tradition attested in Athenaeus and Stobaeus that said Sotades delivered moral instruction to kings. Given the poet's notoriety, these reports had been laughed off as ludicrous, but that may reflect scholarly homophobia, especially in the Victorian era, more than careful scholarship. In his 2009 article, Quapij proposed that Callimachus' epigram 1 Pfeiffer is actually an epimythium aimed at Ptolemy II on the occasion of his marriage, just like Sotades' infamous invective, but wisely more subtle. And in a 2016 paper, he proposed that 2 other lines of Sotadeia, Fragment 9, Line 1, and Fragment 22, may also be authentic. Time will tell whether these more recent theories achieve the consensus favoring Predagastini's reinterpretations. But either way, this exciting new scholarship suggests that archaeology and scientific advances are not the only ways to recover the lost texts of antiquity. Deeper understanding of context and intertextuality are equally valid paths.